Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was some perfect wife. My name is Jenna. I'm 28 years old. And for 4 of those years, I was married to Leo. 4 years. 4 years of watching him move through life like he was perpetually navigating a room in the dark, a room he had lived in his whole life. He was cautious, methodical, and so damn boring. When we first met, I mistook his quietness for depth, his slow smiles for a thoughtful, mysterious nature. I was a brand strategist at one of the top agencies in the city. My life was loud, fast, competitive. He was an urban planner for the city council. His life was zoning permits and community feedback forms. He was my quiet harbor in a storm of deadlines and pitches. But a harbor gets stagnant when you never leave port. It didn't take long to realize his depth was just a lack of substance. He wasn't mysterious, he was just bland. He'd come home every night at exactly 6:15. He'd hang his coat on the same hook. He'd walk into the living room, find me on the couch, and ask that infuriating question, "How was your day, Jen?" And the worst part, he actually wanted to know. He'd sit and listen, his brow furrowed with genuine concern, as I complained about a difficult client or a passive-aggressive email from my boss. He'd offer suggestions. Simple, practical, useless suggestions. "Maybe you should just talk to them about it," he'd say. He didn't understand that my world wasn't about talking things out. It was about winning. I started testing him early on. Little comments. Jabs disguised as jokes. "Another casserole, babe? You're going to turn into a suburban mom before I do." He'd just laugh. That easy, gentle laugh that grated on my nerves. "Well, somebody's gotta cook," he'd say, completely missing the sting. He never fought back. Not once. I'd criticize a project he was excited about, some new bike lane initiative or a public garden proposal, and he'd just nod, considering my words. "That's a good point," he'd concede. I hadn't thought about the traffic flow from that angle. That deference, that easy capitulation, it felt like weakness, and it made me respect him less with every passing day. I needed a partner, a challenger. What I had was a pleasant, agreeable roommate who paid his half of the mortgage on time. Then, there was Caleb. Caleb was the client relations director for a new luxury brand we were trying to land. He wasn't my quiet harbor. He was a lightning storm. He was sharp, ambitious, and he looked at me like he could see the gears turning in my head. He saw my hunger. He matched it. Our meetings would stretch into late dinners. Just brainstorming, we'd call it. We'd share a bottle of wine, our knees occasionally brushing under the table. He listened to my ideas not with quiet support, but with an energetic fire. "That's brilliant, Jenna. Absolutely ruthless. I love it." He spoke my language. One night, we were working late at his office, sketching out a campaign on a whiteboard. The city lights twinkled outside. He came up behind me, his hand resting for just a second on the small of my back as he pointed to something on the board. A jolt went through me. It was electric. Real. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Leo. "Hope your meeting is going well. Don't work too late." I glanced at the message, a wave of irritation washing over me. The smiley face, the mundane, domestic concern. I felt a surge of contempt so strong it almost choked me. I shoved the phone back into my purse. Caleb noticed my expression. "Everything okay?" "Just my husband," I said, rolling my eyes. "Reminding me he exists." Caleb smirked. That quick, knowing smirk that made me feel like we shared a secret. A superior understanding of the world. "He doesn't get it, does he?" Caleb said, his voice low. "What it takes to be someone like you." And he was right. Leo didn't get it. He didn't get me. He thought my ambition was a stressful hobby, something to be managed. Caleb saw it as the very core of who I was. That night, Caleb walked me to my car. Under the dim lights of the parking garage, he leaned in. I thought he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to. But he just tucked a stray piece of hair behind my ear. "Get some rest, superstar," he whispered. "Big day tomorrow." Driving home, my heart was pounding with a thrilling, guilty energy. I walked into the house and found Leo asleep on the couch, the TV still on. A half-empty bowl of popcorn was on the coffee table. He'd waited up for me. A feeling of profound disappointment settled over me. This was my life. Casseroles and popcorn, and a man who thought a bike lane could change the world. I deserved more. I deserved a lightning storm. Not this. Still. Heavy air. Chapter 2. The breaking point at the dinner table. The family dinner was my mother's idea. Of course it was. She loved Leo. They all did. He was polite, helpful, and never said anything remotely controversial. He was the perfect, harmless son-in-law. Their approval of him only made me feel more isolated in my own marriage. I was buzzing with a nervous energy that day. The night before, Caleb had sent me a bottle of expensive champagne with a note to celebrate the win and the winner. We had landed the account. It was a massive victory for me, for the agency. When I told Leo the news, he smiled his gentle smile and said, "That's great, Jen. I'm really proud of you." Proud. It sounded so paternal, so condescending. Caleb had called me a winner, a superstar. Leo called me a good girl who did a good job. So when we walked into my parents' house, I was already on edge. The smell of pot roast filled the air. My dad was telling a loud story about his golf game. My sister, Heather, and her husband were there. Everyone was happy. And Leo, in his usual fashion, was trying way too hard to fit in. He was talking to my cousin about his latest project, that stupid community garden again. I could see him getting animated, his hands gesturing as he explained the importance of native plant species. My cousin was nodding politely, her eyes glazing over. And I just snapped. Something inside me couldn't bear to watch him be so earnest, so mediocre, in front of my family. I felt a flush of secondhand embarrassment. I walked over, a bright, false smile plastered on my face. "Oh, don't let him bore you with his gardening club," I said, laughing as I cut a piece of cheese from the platter. The table went quiet for a beat. Leo looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. But he recovered quickly, smiling along. "It's a bit more than a gardening club, Jen." Oh, but I was already committed. The wine I'd had made me bold. The memory of Caleb's note made me reckless. "Seriously, you guys," I continued, leaning against the counter, playing to the room. "You should have seen him last week. He tried to build a bookshelf for the office. It ended up so crooked. I swear it looked like something out of a Dr. Seuss book. I had to hire a guy to come and fix it properly." Some forced chuckles went around the table. Heather shot me a warning look, but I ignored it. I looked at Leo, expecting him to play along, to make a self-deprecating joke. Instead, he was just quietly watching me, his expression unreadable. His silence infuriated me. It felt like a judgment. So I pushed harder. Later, at the dinner table, the conversation turned to work and careers. My dad was bragging about Heather's husband getting a promotion. The praise hung in the air, thick and sweet. Then, my mother, trying to be inclusive, turned to Leo. "And how are things with the city, Leo? Anything exciting happening?" This was my moment. The perfect setup. Before he could even answer, I jumped in. "Oh, you know, Leo. Always making these big plans. Going to revitalize this neighborhood, build that park." I paused, letting the condescension drip from my words. I turned to look directly at him across the table. "But let's be real, babe." End quote. My voice was low, intimate, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you were actually any good at what you do, don't you think you'd be making a little more money by now?" Dead silence, not the awkward kind, the horrified kind. My dad cleared his throat. My mom started fussing with the salt shaker. Heather just stared down at her plate. I looked at my husband, expecting something. Anger, hurt, an argument, anything. Instead, he just sat there for a long moment, looking at his food. Then he slowly lifted his head and met my gaze. There was no emotion on his face. None at all. He picked up his fork, nodded once, as if considering a valid but uninteresting point. And then he said it. The 5 words that changed everything. "You're absolutely right, Jen." He said it calmly, matter-of-factly, like I had just commented on the weather. Then he took a bite of his pot roast. The conversation never recovered. We stumbled through the rest of the meal with awkward small talk. Leo participated just enough to be polite, but he was different. He was absent, a polite ghost at the table. On the drive home, the silence in the car was a physical thing. It pressed in on me from all sides. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. His reaction, that cold, empty agreement. It was more unsettling than any fight we'd ever had. I finally broke the silence. "Did you have a good time?" "Yeah," he said, his eyes on the road. "Your family's great." That was it. No mention of what I'd said. No accusations. No pain. Just nothing. When we got home, He went through his nightly routine with a new, strange efficiency. He didn't linger in the kitchen. He didn't try to kiss me goodnight. He just brushed his teeth, got into his side of the bed, turned away from me, and went to sleep. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the car replaced by the silence of our bedroom. I had been poking the bear for 4 years, jabbing it with sticks, hoping for a roar. But the bear hadn't roared. It had simply looked at me, turned around, and walked away into the forest, leaving me alone. The man I woke up next to the next morning was a stranger. Or rather, I woke up alone. Leo was already gone. Not just out of bed, but out of the house. A note on the counter said, "Gym. Back by 7. Gym? Leo's idea of exercise was a leisurely weekend bike ride. He'd tried a gym membership twice during our marriage. It lasted 3 weeks. The first time won the second. But this was different. He came home at 7, his hair damp, a focused look on his face. He didn't say much, just showered, dressed in one of his newer, better-fitting work shirts, and left. No lingering kiss goodbye. No, have a good day. I told myself it was a phase. He was angry. He'd get over it. Leo didn't hold grudges, but days turned into a week, and the stranger remained. He was polite. Incredibly so. He'd ask about my day, but his eyes would be on his tablet. He'd listen, but he wouldn't engage. It was like living with a highly efficient, courteous robot, programmed to be my husband. The changes were small at first, but they added up. He stopped leaving his socks on the floor. He started cooking new, healthier recipes he found online, without asking what I wanted for dinner. He stopped asking for my opinion on anything. What tie to wear, whether he should take on an extra project, what to watch on TV. He just decided. I tried to provoke him, to get the old Leo back. "Since when are you Mr. Fitness?" I laughed one evening as he was packing his gym bag. He just shrugged, not looking at me. Decided to make a change. "People change," he said simply. And the way he said it, with such finality, shut me up. My life with Caleb, my supposed escape, also started to feel hollow. The thrill was still there, the stolen moments, the witty banter over text, but one afternoon, I had a brutal meeting with a client. I was torn to shreds over a minor detail in the campaign. I left the office feeling shaken and furious. My first instinct used to be to call Leo, to vent, knowing he'd soothe me. But I couldn't call the new Leo, the robot, so I called Caleb. "Hey, I really need to talk," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "Ah, bad timing, Jenna," he said, his voice breezy. "I'm just about to step into a dinner meeting. Can we connect tomorrow?" "Caleb, I had a really awful, gotta run. Talk tomorrow." And he hung up. I sat in my car, the phone in my hand, feeling utterly alone. Caleb was there for the victories, the celebrations, the champagne. He wasn't here for the defeats. He wasn't a harbor. He was just another storm. A few days later, the jealousy started. A slow, ugly burn. We were at our local coffee shop. The barista, a young woman who had barely acknowledged Leo's existence for years, suddenly leaned over the counter, smiling brightly at him. "The usual Leo? Medium black coffee?" she asked, a flirty lilt in her voice. He smiled back. A new smile. Not his old, eager to please one. This one was smaller, more confident. "You know it, Sarah." She laughed, and I watched, stunned. He'd never told me her name was Sarah. It started happening everywhere. The cashier at the grocery store, a neighbor we ran into while walking the dog. Women were noticing him. His posture was better from the gym. His new clothes fit his broader shoulders. The quietness I had once called bland now seemed like a calm, self-assured confidence. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just being, and people were drawn to it. This wasn't the man I had married. The man I married needed my approval. He orbited me. This new Leo was a planet in his own right, with his own gravitational pull. And I found myself uncomfortably caught in his orbit, an unfamiliar moon. One night, I decided to test him. A final, desperate attempt to see if the old Leo was still in there. "I'm going out for drinks with Heather," I told him. "Probably be home late." The old Leo would have asked where, what time, told me to be safe. The new Leo just looked up from his book. "Okay. Have fun." I sat at a bar with my sister, my phone face up on the table, waiting. For a text. A call. Anything. Heather watched me. Are you going to tell me what's going on with you two? Nothing's going on, I lied. He's just been busy. He looks good, Jenna, she said quietly. Really good. Happy. The word hit me like a slap. Happy. My phone stayed dark all night. When I got home after midnight, the house was silent. Leo was asleep in our bed. He didn't even stir when I climbed in beside him. He hadn't needed to know I was safe. He hadn't worried. He hadn't even noticed I was gone. And for the first time, the thought that I was losing him wasn't a relief. It was terrifying. My father's 60th birthday party was 2 months after that fateful dinner. 2 months of living with the ghost of my husband. I was nervous about the party, but also morbidly curious. How would this new, confident Leo act around my family? Would the pressure make him revert to his old, fawning self? He walked into my parents' house like he owned the place. Not with arrogance, just with an easy, unshakable sense of belonging. He greeted everyone warmly, but without the nervous energy that used to radiate from him. He handed my father a thoughtfully chosen bottle of single malt scotch, and they fell into a conversation about it, man to man. I watched from the kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own family. The main event happened over dinner, just like before. It was almost poetic. My uncle was asking Leo about his work, not out of politeness, but with genuine interest. So, that downtown revitalization project you mentioned, my uncle said. I saw in the paper that the city council approved the final funding. That was your proposal, wasn't it? Leo smiled. It was a team effort, but yeah, I was the project lead. We just broke ground last week. He went on to talk about the initiative, the challenges, the innovative public-private partnership he'd structured. He spoke with a passion and clarity I had never heard from him before. He wasn't just talking about bike lanes. He was talking about community, about legacy, about building something that would last. Everyone at the table was captivated. Even my father was listening intently. My sister's husband, the one with the big promotion, asked him a detailed question about zoning laws. Leo answered it effortlessly. I sat there, sipping my wine, feeling my own presence shrink with every word he spoke. He was interesting. He was impressive. The man I had relentlessly mocked for his lack of ambition was now the most compelling person in the room. I couldn't stand it. I felt the old impulse rise up in me, the need to take him down a peg, to remind everyone of the real Leo, the one I knew. When there was a lull in the conversation, I laughed, a little too loudly. Well, look at you, I said, my voice dripping with what I hoped sounded like affectionate teasing. It's about time one of your grand ideas actually went somewhere. The table fell silent. It was happening all over again. But this time was different. Leo didn't ignore me. He didn't agree with me. He turned his head slowly and looked directly at me. His eyes weren't empty like before. They were clear, sharp, and completely unimpressed. He held my gaze for a long moment before speaking, his voice calm and carrying to every corner of the silent room. No, Jenna, he said. The difference is that I stopped listening to people who never believed I could. The air was sucked out of the room. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. Heather's eyes were wide. My father stared at Leo, then at me, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. What could I say? That I did believe in him? Everyone at this table had been a witness to my years of casual cruelty. He hadn't just defended himself. He had exposed me. He held my gaze for one more second, then turned back to my uncle as if nothing had happened and continued the conversation. But everything had happened. For the rest of the night, I was invisible. People talked to Leo, not around him. They asked his opinion. They laughed at his jokes. I just sat there, a bitter, silent spectator at the celebration of the man my husband had become. The drive home was a blur of silent fury and humiliation. As he pulled into the driveway, I finally found my voice. What the hell was that, Leo? He turned off the engine and faced me. That same unimpressed look was on his face. What was what? You know what. You deliberately embarrassed me in front of my entire family. I told the truth, he said simply. The words were not an attack. They were a statement of fact. If the truth embarrasses you, maybe you should think about why. And Fru. He got out of the car, leaving me sitting there, my mouth hanging open. He had never, ever spoken to me like that. I followed him inside, my heart pounding. He was in the bathroom, calmly brushing his teeth. We are not done talking about this. He spit into the sink and looked at my reflection in the mirror. Done talking about what, Jenna? You've spent 4 years telling anyone who would listen that I'm a failure. Tonight, I simply declined to play my part. The end. And Burley, I never said you were a failure. He turned around, leaning against the counter. The gesture made his shoulders seem even broader. Didn't you? The bookshelf story. The jokes about my salary. The constant sighs every time I mentioned a new idea. He shook his head. You didn't have to use the word, Jenna. I heard it loud and clear. My mind raced, searching for a defense. I was just joking. That's just how I am. No, he said, his voice dangerously soft. That's not how you are. That's how you are with me. And I'm not interested in being your punchline anymore. He walked past me into the bedroom and started getting ready for bed. I followed him, feeling a rising panic. So what is this? Some kind of revenge? He pulled his shirt over his head, his back muscles flexing. It's not revenge, Jenna, he said, turning to face me. It's retirement. Oh, and with that, he got into bed, leaving me standing in the middle of the room, realizing that the man I had married was gone, and I had no idea who this new man was, or how to get the old one back. My life became a one-woman campaign to win back my husband, though, at the time, I wouldn't have called it that. I would have called it fixing things. I started making his favorite meals, the rich, heavy foods he loved that I'd always called unhealthy. He'd eat them politely. This is delicious, thank you. No enthusiasm, no nostalgia, just courtesy. I bought a new dress, a slinky black one he would have loved on the old me. I wore it for a date night I'd planned. He looked at me and nodded. You look nice. It was the same tone he would use for a well-arranged floral centerpiece. Nothing worked. It was like throwing pebbles at a brick wall. I suggested we go on a vacation, just the two of us. We could go back to that place on the coast, I said, trying to sound breezy. That's a nice idea, he said, not looking up from his laptop. I'm pretty busy with the project right now, though. The conversation was over before it began. I was losing, and I have never been a good loser. My desperation drove me back to Caleb. I needed a win. I needed to feel desired, powerful. I texted him, suggesting we meet. He agreed, and we met at a sleek downtown bar, the kind with low lighting and overpriced cocktails. But the old magic was gone. I spent the whole time talking about Leo, about the bizarre, frustrating situation at home. Caleb listened, swirling the ice in his drink, his expression bored. Sounds tough, he said with a distinct lack of sympathy. I just don't know what to do, I said, hoping for some advice, some comfort. He sighed, placing his glass down with a decisive click. Look, Jenna, this has been fun. It really has. But I'm not really the guy you talk to about your marital problems. I'm not looking to get dragged into all this drama. Drama? He called my collapsing life drama. So what was this then? I asked, my voice trembling. Just fun? What did you think it was? He asked, a cruel, honest question. He threw some cash on the table. I've got to run. Take care of yourself, Jenna. And he was gone, leaving me alone at the bar. He wasn't a lightning storm. He was a cheap firework. A quick, bright flash, and then, nothing. Just smoke and the smell of sulfur. I went home that night completely broken. Leo was in the living room, reading. I stood in the doorway, and the sight of him, so calm and self-contained, made something inside me shatter. The tears I'd been holding back started to fall. He looked up, his expression softening slightly, with something that looked like pity. Jenna? Are you okay? No, I sobbed. No, I'm not okay. What's happening to us, Leo? He put his book down and gave me his full attention for the first time in months. Nothing is happening to us, he said gently. This is just what we are now. And